diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X saying Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring. The 48-year-old has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times he's known for a year that his cancer is terminal. While undergoing treatment in February, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the 3rd most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and 1 silver medal. Some sad breaking news to bring you now. The body of a man has been recovered from the River Thames near Sunbury today. Surrey police have been searching near the riverside near Whately's Eart since Friday, following a call to emergency services at around 8:50 a.m, reporting that 6 adults had entered the water. 5 people were safely rescued from the water, but the 6th, a man in his 60s, was unaccounted for. Sadly, earlier today, specialist search teams recovered a body near Sunbury Weir. Formal identification is yet to take place, but the family of the missing man has been informed and are being supported by a specialist officer. Fans in the UK and around the world are holding vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event has taken place in London's Hyde Park this afternoon, with fans encouraged to bring letters, drawings and flowers. A minute of silence was held at the Peter Pan statue. Liam's father visited the Casur Hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died, while his bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. Parts of the country are dealing with dangerous weather conditions this afternoon due to Storm Ashley's arrival. Parts of Western Scotland and Northern Ireland are under an amber weather warning for strong winds, with the Met Office warning of power cuts and damage to buildings. Danger to life is also reportedly likely from large waves hitting coastal roads. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. I'm Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor, filling in for Camilla today. I'll be speaking to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, about Labour's first budget and his plans for the National Health Service. I'll also be joined live from Brisbane, Australia, by former Australian High Commissioner to the UK, George Brandis, to discuss the King and Queen's visit down under. I'll be joined by the former Brexit Secretary and Tory grandee, Sir David Davis, on a key weekend in the Tory leadership battle. Up-and-coming Labour MP for Makerfield, Josh Simons, will be here too. Don't go anywhere. Welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show and GB News. Thank you for coming on. You want a national conversation about the NHS, so let's have one right now. Why is it that spending can go up by 2.8% a year in the NHS between 2015-16, 2022-2023, but the outcomes get worse? Why is it that the numbers of operations performed by surgeons falls between 2019 and 2023? Why is it we tip more money into this leaky bucket and it's not getting any better for our viewers and listeners?
That is exactly the right question. And what's happened is we've seen more money and more staff poured in, but without the reform. And I think the lesson of the last Labour government that delivered the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history is that it's investment plus reform that delivers results. And that's why a big focus of me, the Chancellor, is about how we make sure that alongside any investment that goes in, we improve the productivity of the system. There will be a big focus in the budget around the investment in things like capital and tech so that we can make the system more efficient. But even where we're doing things like the 40,000 more appointments every week, that will also be achieved through reformed ways of working so we get more bang for the buck, because people are feeling the pinch in their pockets at the moment, and right across the public sector we've got pressures. So we can't just keep on pouring more money in without reform. That would be a waste of money we don't have and a waste of time that we don't have as well.
Well, why do you think you can do better than other ministers? I mean, let's put the Tory government to one side, but Gordon Brown increased NHS spending by 7% in real terms in 2001. Most people think that money went into the pockets of staff, not into actual outcomes for taxpayers who pay for the service. Why are you different to all of your predecessors?
Well, hang on a second. I mean, as I said, the last Labour government did deliver the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction. We've been in for 3 months. In that time, we've ended the junior doctors' strikes. We've introduced a ban on junk food targeted at kids. We've employed 1,000 more GPs onto the NHS front line. In the coming days, we'll be sending crack teams of clinicians into hospitals, not just with high waiting lists, but high numbers of people off work, off sick. And also, you know, just last week at the International Investment Summit, where we agreed £63 billion worth of deals with the private sector, some of that money was also earmarked for life sciences and groundbreaking treatments to tackle obesity. So I'm not pretending we've fixed it all in a few months. Of course, we're not going to do that, and I can't fix 14 years of problems in one budget. But we have hit the ground running. We're getting on with the job, and of course, the best is yet to come.
But why did Professor Sir John Bell, a former Oxford University Regius professor, saying he thinks the NHS is not underfunded, to be honest? Well, you're not getting the best out of the money you're getting. I mean, why is he saying that?
Well, I think John's got a fair point in that, you know, if you look at the Darzi investigation we commissioned into the state of the NHS, Ara Darzi pointed out that we've actually had more staff going into our hospitals, for example, but productivity has fallen. Now, that's partly because we've not given staff the tools to do the job, and you talk to people in the NHS, and when I say things like, look, we're going to improve life sciences and medical technology, the staff say, that's brilliant, but I'd be just grateful if I could go into work and turn a machine on in the morning and it works reliably, or if I don't have to input 7 passwords to deal with one patient. So we've got to get the basics right. It's also about making sure the money goes to the right places. And, for example, pouring more and more money into our hospitals isn't going to fix the crisis. I think putting more money into neighbourhood health services, primary care, that would make a difference, because if someone can't get a GP appointment that costs 40 quid, for example, they can end up in A&E, which costs 400. So you can see how that would be worse for patients in terms of their convenience and getting to the right place at the right time. Also worse for the taxpayer. And that's why I am focused relentlessly on reform and making sure the NHS works more efficiently, more effectively. And it's been interesting since the general election. Obviously, the Conservative Party won't admit their mistakes, but I've had support from the Liberal Democrats, and I've had support from Nigel Farage and the Reform Party on some of the things we've been saying about NHS reform. So I think we are building a new national consensus here, and I think that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, well, but everyone hopes that you can improve services, but the record so far hasn't shown up by previous governments. But moving on to where the money's coming from, the budget, October 30th, you did say in your manifesto you weren't going to increase national insurance or the basic higher or additional rate of income tax or VAT. So why are you looking at increasing national insurance, and why are you looking at increasing income tax by freezing thresholds?
So I'll just say 2 things. Firstly, I genuinely don't know what decisions the Chancellor has made or is making about tax, because she doesn't share those until much closer to the budget, and I'm not going to speculate because I value my kneecaps, and the Chancellor won't tolerate me going around speculating about her budget. But all I would say, just on this point about national insurance, we were very clear in our manifesto: no increases in income tax, national insurance or VAT on working people. And we will keep those promises. And I remember us getting criticised before the general election with people saying, well, why aren't you making bigger promises? Why aren't you going to spend more on X, Y or Z? We were deliberately cautious because we knew that the public finances are in a state. In fact, they're even worse than we expected. But therefore, we wanted to make sure that the promises we made were promises we could keep and the country can afford. And despite the challenges we've walked into, I can tell you we will honour every single one of those manifesto commitments.
But it's widely agreed that the Tories lost power because they lost trust with the electorate. Aren't you risking that very trust that you won the election with by increasing taxes for working people? You are doing that, aren't you, by increasing employers' NICs and carrying on the freeze with the thresholds in income tax?
Well, we were criticised by the Tories before the election because we didn't rule out explicitly those things. But I just say to people watching, like, we don't take your trust lightly. And we know how low the opinion of politics and politicians in this country is at the moment, and that includes us. I think it really is a plague on all your houses as far as the public are concerned, and that is why we are determined to earn your trust through what we actually deliver. And I just say to people, especially as we are making some choices that are unpopular, the last thing you want, surely, is more government by gimmick, more short-term sticking plasters, and the false hope of broken promises. That's not what we're going to do. And we are working hell for leather to make sure that when this government's time comes to an end, that we leave this country in a better place than we found it. That is something that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives couldn't say after 14 years of Conservative government. We are determined to do better. We have an enormous challenge on our hands. We can't fix all of those problems in one budget, but we are focused on fixing the foundations, getting the basics right, and not just rebuilding our economy and rebuilding our public services, but rebuilding trust in politics as a force for good.
And just finally, Wes Streeting, back to your department, you like to tell us you're not the fun police, you're not the nanny state, and you have once said the NHS can't pick up the tab for unhealthy lifestyles, but should the NHS be funding Ozempic, this miracle anti-obesity drug? Why not get people to eat less and move more and save us all money?
So, I'd say two things. Firstly, these weight loss jabs aren't a panacea. Like, we can't just jab our way to a healthy living. And in fact, I think, we're watching the evidence really closely. We're about to start a trial. It was one of the things we announced at the International Investment Summit last week. But I think the emerging evidence is that jabs alone won't work. You've got to do the jabs plus changes to diet and exercise. So where people are able to access the treatment, the right to access the treatment will come with the responsibility to do the right thing. We don't want a dependency culture in this country.
Thank you to Wes Streeting. Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling joining us today on Camilla Tominey. Coming up, I'll be joined by the former Australian Attorney General George Brandis to discuss the King and Queen's visit down under, and Tory bigwig Sir David Davis. He's here too. This is the Camilla Tominey Show.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The former royal correspondent for the Sun newspaper, Charles Ray. Good to see you this morning, Charles, and so good to see Catherine back to work with a hug.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, there are a few royal jobs that, touch at the heartstrings, and this is certainly one of those. And I think it's the first time we've actually seen Catherine back in, a royal duty since she herself confirmed that she'd finished chemotherapy.
Done so much, haven't they, the Princess of Wales and the King, to raise awareness for these cancers.
Here we have both the King and Catherine having, explained to the nation and the rest of the world that they were battling or are still battling cancer, just like everyone else.
How sincere is all of this? I mean, it looks like she's a wonderful, kind, caring woman, but I don't know. I've never met her.
Well, she is a wonderful, kind, caring woman. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And William heard about this young lady on a visit to the air ambulance, and they invited her because she's a photographer, so she wanted to take. She has a bucket list and wanted to take pictures of an investiture. I mean, make no mistake, people like Catherine are just absolutely wonderful in what they do and how they do it. I mean, and Catherine is the superstar of the royal family. Of that, there is no doubt.
It's the cockles of my heart, Charles. It really does. It's really good to see you. Thanks very much.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Charles. Thanks. And Liz, who is the 16-year-old amateur photographer who was hugged by Princess of Wales yesterday said it was a dream come true.
I bet it was.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope. Lots more still to come. In just a minute, I'll be joined by the former Australian High Commissioner to the UK, George Brandis, to discuss the royal visit there by the King and the Queen. I'll then be joined by Sir David Davis, the Tory grandee, to discuss the Conservative leadership campaign. He's backing Kemi Badenoch, by the way, and much, much more. And after that, up-and-coming Labour MP Josh Simons. I'm joined now by the former Australian High Commissioner to the UK and the former Australian Attorney General, George Brandis. George, thank you for joining GB News. How is the visit of the King and Queen being received by Australians?
Well, it's been very successful so far. I mean, today has been the first day of engagements by the King and Queen. As you heard on the news bulletin, they attended a church service this morning, and then the King went to the New South Wales Parliament for an extremely important observance, the 200th anniversary of the creation of the New South Wales Legislative Council, which is the first parliamentary chamber in Australia in colonial times. So this marks the 200th anniversary of parliamentary government in Australia, and the King presided at that ceremony. He had attended a lunch, and then this afternoon he's had a number of engagements with dignitaries. But look, the crowds, both outside the church and outside the New South Wales Parliament House, were very enthusiastic, very large crowds, and I'm sure His Majesty is delighted with the reception he's received.
And George, is it right then that the large crowds greeting him, you're seeing on the screen now images from the visit today, early today, is it right that that reflects the wider approval of the monarchy? Or, of course, we hear reports in the UK of Republicans. I think the King has said, I'll be the King of your country as long as you want me to be, which is, I guess, all he can say. But how big a problem for the monarchy is the Republican movement?
Well, the first point to make, Christopher, is, of course, that King Charles visits Australia as King of Australia, not as King of England. He is your king, but he's our king as well. And Australians know that. And most Australians are very happy about that. There has been a Republican movement in Australia stretching back to the 1970s, or even a little earlier than that. And about perhaps 25 years ago, when we had a referendum on the subject, it was fairly strong. But I have to say that I've never seen support for the idea of an Australian republic so feeble in my adult lifetime as it is at the moment. There was an opinion poll published about a fortnight ago which showed support for Australia becoming a republic at 33%, support for the status quo at 45%, and the rest undecided. Now, I don't remember a time since these polls first began to be taken in the late 1970s, when support for a republic was as low as 33%. Usually it sits somewhere in the mid-40s. And I think that reflects the fact that the issue, Australians are sick of this issue. We've heard too much about it for so long, and we've really moved on. It's very much, I think, yesterday's issue.
But we see reports in the UK of 5 of the 6 state premiers, in quotes, snubbing the king, not wanting to meet up. And that's sort of interpreted over here as a kind of antipathy or a kind of shrugging the shoulders towards the monarchy. Is that incorrect?
I wouldn't overinterpret it. I mean, these are all but one of them are Labor premiers. The Labor Party is in government in all but one of the states at the moment. And the Labor Party is almost uniformly pro-Republican. And in that respect, it doesn't reflect the plurality of opinion in the country at large. The Premier in my state, Queensland, is 6 days away from a state election, so one can perhaps understand why he's rather preoccupied. As for the others, you know, I think it's poor form, but as I say, the Labor Party is a lonely redoubt of republicanism in this country.
Mm. It's appropriate then for the modern Australia that there's not an Australian person as head of state. That seems to sit well still with the country.
Well, I think that in a sense misses the point, because we feel that we know King Charles very well. He went to school here when he was a teenager, something that obviously meant a great deal to him, and he often reflects on as a very happy time of his life as a youngster. This is his 17th visit. Australians are so familiar with him. They like him. They regard him as ours. And of course he's an Englishman and he lives mostly in England. But Australians have a sense that he is ours as well, that although not an Australian himself, that he is one of us. And I'm sure that is grounded in the fact that he displays such obvious and enthusiastic affection for Australia and its people.
And just finally, George Brandis, how should we judge the success of this visit? I mean, the crowd's turning out, looks great. It's obviously the weather's much better than in the UK. It looks fantastic images from down under. How should we judge the success for ours and your King and Queen?
Well, I think the most practical way to judge is to look at the crowds. And I'm sure, particularly when their Majesties take their walk around the Sydney Opera House, as they will do later in the program, for instance, or when they go to the Australian War Memorial tomorrow, you'll see very enthusiastic crowds because, as I said, there is deep and abiding affection in Australia for King Charles. There is, people are well aware of how much this country means to him, and that affection is reciprocated.
Thank you for joining us. In just one moment, I'll be speaking to one of the longest-serving Tory MPs in Parliament, Sir David Davis, about the Tory leadership race, the upcoming budget, and as ever with David Davis, much, much more than that. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. A stormy day out there with Storm Ashley gradually clearing. Then it will be a case of blustery showers in the north, but drier towards the south. Looking at the bigger picture, this is this area of low pressure named Storm Ashley that will gradually be moving its way north and eastward, but a real squeeze in those isobars indicating some strong winds. There are Met Office wind warnings in force. We could see gusts 70 to possibly 80 miles per hour as we go through Sunday night and into Monday morning, followed by blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, drier towards the south with lows of 11 to 12 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, still some very strong winds, especially across northern parts of Scotland and then into Orkney and Shetland. Again, 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour here. Further towards the west, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east that you go with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down, but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds, but also some showers showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. I'm now joined by Sir David Davis, the Conservative MP for Goole and Pocklington, former Brexit Secretary, one of the longest-serving MPs in Parliament, etc., etc., etc. You're backing Kemi Badenoch. Yep. In this contest. Members vote this weekend, I think. It's almost all over by midweek, I think.
I think that's probably right. I mean, I was speaking last night in York, and a significant number of those people had actually already voted. I mean, they wanted to hear my views, but they'd already voted. And I think this weekend will be the biggest peak, I think.
And they saw the event that I hosted for GB News on Thursday.
A very large number had. You know, normally you wouldn't expect most of the audience to have seen it, but they had. And, I mean, they were clear. They thought Kemi had won easily, as, frankly, your audience, because you chaired it, and by the way, it was brilliant chairing. I mean, you know, it's quite difficult to get that right. And the audience in the studio were 4-5 to 1 on Kemi's side, and the next day in the Telegraph it was 78-22. So you know, it's looking. I mean, it's looking good for her, I think.
Why are people in the audience there, maybe people in the Telegraph and other members anecdotally in York, warming to Kemi Badenoch? I mean, she's quite prickly by reputation.
Well, by reputation, yes, but in person, she's charming. I mean, as the audience will see, you don't need to believe me. Watch that, watch the replay, as it were, of the other night. You know,
it's on our screens now. They're watching clips now.
She's got a charisma about her, you know, which you can't make up. You know, you can't school people to give people that charisma. And it comes partly out of her self-confidence, partly out of her determination to defend a cause, you know, which people want. I mean, you know, as they did with Margaret Thatcher, you know, they want somebody. They don't want somebody who's a pussycat. They want
off it. You can't always go back to Thatcher. You always think the next person is the next Thatcher, and then it never works out, David Davis.
That's always the claim, I know. And every single would-be Tory leader wants to be seen as another Thatcher, because you know, she was basically the greatest Prime Minister for the best part of a century. But you know, I'm supporting her. I remember Thatcher. I was a student leader in those days, as was Lord Michael Forsyth, who's also supporting her. The two student leaders who dealt with Thatcher as Education Secretary before she was leader, and then we were both very junior members of her team. You know, we can see the similarities. Look, there are plenty of differences, but today is a time when we're facing similar-sized problems. In those days, it was the Soviet Union, it was the miners, it was out-of-control inflation. Today, it's a war in Europe, it's a national health. You've just had Wes Streeting on. It's a national health service. It's proving almost
But Robert Jenner can take on those issues too, can't he?
Well, I'm not so sure. You know, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I like Robert. He was very fluent on your debate, and he wasn't. You know, he wasn't hopeless. It wasn't a walkover in that sense. But you know, he's trying too many headlines. Bluntly, I mean, you know, what we did in the 70s, and it wasn't just Thatcher, it was all the people around her, was we worked out our principles and then we spent 4 years finding solutions to those really impossible problems. And that's what we've got to do now.
I mean, we talked earlier with Patrick O'Flynn. He's doing everything he can to win votes, isn't he? Tearing up the unconservative Climate Change Act, Action the Equality Act, Human Rights Act, replacing them with a Great Reform Act. He's throwing everything at the wall. But it's not sticking in your world.
No, it's not. And so some of it's coming apart almost straight away. I mean, the stuff on ECHR, I mean, even The Spectator was been saying, look, you know, the Rwanda policy wasn't turned down just because of that. The court made clear that there were British statutes. There was the UN torture treaty. There was a UN refugee treaty. We're going to withdraw from everything. And even that thing, which was unwise, I thought, he did on the SAS in Afghanistan, was rebutted by 3 SAS officers.
During the party conference.
Yeah, 3 SAS officers within 2 or 3 days. So, you know, the trick with this is to know what you're trying to do, but not try to sort of make up a headline straight away. Take your time. I mean, Kemi's an engineer and a lawyer by training, and you know that means she's analytical, she's clinical about this. You see it in her previous work. I mean, you see it in the international trade, where she got the biggest trade treaty post-Brexit, the Pacific one, but also not just that. She was business secretary for the postmasters, and before the docudrama, before everybody knew about it, she'd already stepped in and given them a £600,000 guaranteed payment before the docudrama.
So she saw it coming. She didn't do very well on removing retained EU law, did she? 600, I think.
Well, you say that.
But she says it was more like 2,000, but nowhere near the 6,000 which Jacob Rees-Mogg set out.
Well, and with great disrespect to Jacob, I was the Brexit secretary before that, and I was a Leaver before Jacob was an MP. So, and I know exactly what she was trying to do. She was taking away the worst ones and leaving in place others which we have got to replace. You can't just throw the law away. You've got to replace it with something. And I'm afraid my ERG colleagues were just going, oh, sweep it all away, without thinking through.
Do you worry she's not the finished article in terms of politics? The confusion she got into about maternity pay, she's trying to attack regulation of small businesses during a party conference. She said that maternity pay is a bit overbearing on some companies. Then she had to do tweets and then a video, then a clip explaining what she meant. Some of your colleagues were forced to defend it. I mean,
you're going to tell me off for mentioning Thatcher again, but you know that was exactly the same with the young Thatcher. You know, Margaret Thatcher, milk snatcher. Remember all that?
Yes,
you know,
that was when she was a minister in education.
When she was a minister, you know, and you know, the point about this is that we're not in power today. You know, if we're clever about this, we will be in power in 4 years. If you'd asked me the day after the general election, I'd have said we're out for 10 years. You know, those numbers look terrible, but it's a mile wide and an inch deep, this majority, and they have had the worst start to the Labour, have had the worst start to government of any government in my lifetime, you know, which is quite long now. Not quite since Gladstone, but, you know, and so we are in with a real chance if we solve the real problems with real answers.
For me, it starts at the budget. That's when the movie starts. We're in the trailers at the moment. I think we're in the prologue towards the narrative.
It's going to be a horror movie, I'm afraid.
Well, it's going to be quite difficult for many, but others might think it's good to spend money on the NHS and public health service workers.
We spent record amounts of money.
For very bad outcomes from the Tory party.
Exactly. Record increases before the pandemic, and the actual output went down.
But why? But that's because of you, but bad management by the Tory party. Wes Streeting thinks he can get better outcomes through
Wes
tech
Streeting has just done a deal with doctors, lots of money and no payback, no change of procedure. If you want to actually improve the NHS, it's going to take some change of approach. That means the doctors have to change the way they attack things and deal with things. Well, that should have been in that pay deal, wasn't there?
Just back to your candidate, Camilla Tominey. I mean, she helped to bring down Boris Johnson, who won the mandate in 2019. I know you said in the House of Commons, in the name of God, go, and you an early opponent.
I was probably the first, so, you know.
OK, but put that to one side. She was not very loyal, was she, when she was a minister for Johnson? And Boris Johnson, had you guys stuck with him, he may have done better than Rishi Sunak in the election.
No, I'm afraid not. I mean, look, why did we decide we wanted rid of Boris? Because he'd broken his promises, he'd imposed laws.
Camilla wasn't loyal. Camilla Badenoch was not loyal to Boris Johnson. That's the key point.
There were 50 ministers who dropped out of that government. 50. You're going to accuse all of them of some sort of fatal crime? No, they recognised that Boris is no longer a good Prime Minister, no longer an asset to Tory.
What did she mean when she said that civil servants, should be jailed? She's jailed and the like.
She was making a point point. One of the things that's happened since I've been in government, I mean, bear in mind, on and off, I've been in government since the 90s, is that the civil service has got worse and worse at its job. It's got worse and worse at taking orders.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, you're going to kick me. When Thatcher was in power, lots of civil servants didn't agree with what she stood for, but they did what they were told.
But she said 5 or 10% of civil servants are very bad, should be in prison bad. I mean, that's ridiculous.
The truth is 5 or 10% are very bad. And as she also
not
said...
criminal bad, though, come on.
As she said as well, she said 10% are really brilliant. And that's also true. And what we've got to do, she keeps talking about rewiring the state. And rewiring the state doesn't mean locking them all up. It means actually redesigning the way we do things. She's an engineer.
And there's time for that.
And there's time for that, exactly.
But it's principles, it's vibes, it's saying trust me when trust was a thing that you lost back in the election.
Trust me. I mean, I started out by telling you what she had done before.
Yeah.
That isn't just about trust, that's about performance.
Okay.
And she said to me, I mean, she talked to me last week, and she said, what do I think about, if we win, what do I think about who should be in the shadow cabinet? And she said, I want a meritocracy. Her opening words, I want a meritocracy.
What job does she offer you?
I don't want one. And I won't.
Okay.
And I won't be. You hold me to
You heard it here on Camilla Tominey Show. You don't want a job in the shadow cabinet.
I'll happily help, but I don't want an official title.
Okay.
But the simple truth is that she wants a meritocracy. The last several prime ministers have not really had the best possible people in their cabinets, and she's determined to have the best possible people. That's really, really important. That again, you're going to kick me again. That's what Thatcher had. That's what Major had. But not
Robert Jenrick resigned over immigration, net migration and illegal. Kevin Bay not stayed put. He has principles, she doesn't.
Yeah, you think so? I mean, look, he resigned at the very end of the time. During the reshuffle, he resigned. I mean, if you're going to resign, I know about resigning.
You've resigned.
I know.
I've been there watching it.
I know about resigning. You make the point. You make the principle. Not when something else is happening. Off your bat. And
even when it hurts you, actually, to be fair, you resigned over the Big Brother state in 2008.
It only works if it hurts you. It only actually works because then people say, he means it, right? That's the point, and that's the distinction.
Good point. Alex Salmond, of course, has passed away, a friend of yours. You became emotional in the Commons this week. What he endured, the apparatus of the state turned against him. People are saying on Twitter, social media, why are people being so nice about this guy, given how he behaved towards some of his staff? He even his defence lawyer said he could be inappropriate, difficult to work with, behaved badly during that case. I know he was cleared of all charges.
Well, that's the point. That's the first thing to remember, right? I mean, the procedure used against him was described by the senior Scottish court as tainted with bias. That's where we start.
Okay.
A government that's why I was quoting his lawyer when I used that phrase about this state, tainted with bias. Then he appears in front of a predominantly female jury and a female judge and is cleared of every single charge. And frankly,
he behaved badly when he had power. That's the point.
Look, lots of enemies will trot out now. Of course they will. I mean, he's an old-fashioned man, and he himself said he's not a saint.
Yes.
He's a 50s man in a way. But the simple truth is, he didn't deserve what was done to him. It was the sort of thing you expect an oppressive state to do, not a British democracy.
And it's time to judge the whole record of the man. Is that your point?
Yes. Well, my point's more than that in a way. I mean, first thing, when you go into public life, if you're decent and you're doing it for the right reasons, you want to change the world, right? Well, Alec changed the world. He's got a devolution settlement for Scotland, which is much stronger than anybody else could possibly have got.
The so-called vow unveiled before the referendum.
He scared the life out of the Cameron-Osborne government by his arguments. And we were on... I mean, he was due to have dinner with me the night after he died. And we were planning how to improve the way the Scottish Parliament worked.
Yeah.
And we would do it. In fact, I'm going to do it, but we would have done it.
Yeah. Just moving on quickly, the handing over of the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, your government started that. It's your fault too, isn't it?
I don't know what...
Not your fault personally, Tory's fault.
I don't know what Cleverly was doing there, but what this is almost certainly is the Foreign Office trying to pursue its "be nice to everybody" line. The raw truth is it's a strategic error of the First Order, you know, and it's important because of America. It's important because in the future, those sorts of islands are going to matter.
And just very finally, you're investigating the Lucy Letby trial.
Yeah.
What's the update on that? Was it a miscarriage of justice? Have you met with her yet?
No, I haven't met with her. I mean, I'm not worried about it. And people ask, would I meet with her? I said, yes, if she wants to, but I don't. I'm not going to make a judgment of her innocence or guilt by looking at her and saying, you know, are you guilty? I'm judging on the evidence. I spent 3 months going through the evidence.
And where are you now? Guilty or not guilty?
I think most likely, you can't be certain, but most likely, like 90-odd%, not guilty. The most likely reason is one of two things. Either poor management of the hospital, the Royal College found that, or a superbug, Pseudomonas, an investigation found that, or both together. That's much more likely.
So is it time then to retry Lucy Letby?
Yeah, I don't want to declare her innocent. I want a retrial. Do it properly.
OK, look, Sir David Davis, forgive me. Thank you for joining us today on Camilla Tominey's show. If you want to catch up on that debate we held, or I helped to host on Thursday for GB News, Decision Time, the race to lead, it's on our website. Go to gbnews.com/shows to catch up. Now, coming up next, I'll be joined by the Labour MP, Josh Simons.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Online dating apps are still the go-to for millions of British adults, with 1 in 10 using them to look for a romantic connection.
Yes, are you one of them? Let us know. But with many apps introducing subscription fees and complex algorithms, the world of online dating has never been harder to navigate. So who better to join us to discuss this than Mr. Tinder himself, Stefan Pierre Tomlin. You have been dubbed Britain's best-looking eligible bachelor.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2016. Got an email from Tinder, and it was like, "You're the most swiped man on Tinder."
So just explain to us, for viewers who don't know, what is swiping? What does that mean on Tinder?
Yeah, so on Tinder, the app, if you swipe left, that means you don't like the person in front of you, and if you swipe to the right, that means you like that person.
Do you mind still being associated with that? It's a good thing.
Well, I mean, it made me who I am now, and I love sharing how I was successful, and now I'm like a dating expert.
What's your situation now? Are you with anyone? Are you still single, paying the bill?
So I'm seeing someone at the minute. Things are going well, and I'm a dating expert, so I'm always giving advice to people.
Does she know your title of most swiped?
Of course, who doesn't? It's quite hard. It's quite hard being the most swiped man on Tinder because you get a label on you. So I find it harder than anyone else, to be honest.
And where did you meet her? That's the big question.
At an event.
So not on Tinder?
Not on Tinder, ironically. Yeah.
So for all that troubled online, it's actually a real life rendezvous. Which,
I mean, I have met people on Tinder in the past, and it has worked. Well, it didn't work, but yeah.
I need to know how to do the famous Stefan Smolder.
That camera is not a camera. That is your best friend, that's your lover. So you really smiles from the camera, so it goes like this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope, here on GB News. I'm the GB News' political editor. I'm delighted now to be joined by Labour MP for Makerfield, Josh Simons. Josh, great to see you. Thank you for joining us on GB News. You're an up-and-coming Labour MP. You went to private school. Are you happy that VAT is now being put on the bills for parents at your former school in Cambridge?
I am, yeah. My school was a fantastic school. I was incredibly lucky to have the education that I had. My dad was a working class kid who set up a business, grew that business, sold it, and then was able to pay for my education, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But I think it's the right thing to do for schools like mine, for parents who are sending kids to schools like mine, to be charged VAT on their school fees. It'll raise about £4 billion, and that money will be invested into a state sector that the vast majority of children go to. So I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
You mentioned your working class father's background there, Josh Simons. Would he have been able to afford a 20% uplift in fees?
Well, he went to a grammar school. He went to a grammar school in Bury, so he didn't go to a private school and wouldn't have been able to afford it at the time. He was able to afford it because he set up a business. He set up a small business. He grew that business. He invested blood, sweat and tears in it. And then he sold that business, fortuitously, just before the financial crisis. And so he was able, therefore, to pay for my education. And yes, he would have been able to afford that VAT on private school fees. And if you ask my dad, who's come from that background and gone on that journey, he's an example of a success story in this country. He absolutely thinks it's the right thing to do to charge parents like him VAT on private school fees.
You don't worry about state schools being overwhelmed by children leaving the private system and going into the state sector?
Far from worrying about it, part of what makes public schools, state schools, work is a real diversity of backgrounds that kids come into them from. And we know this in the towns, for example, the towns in the constituency that I represent. With any one of the towns, Orrell, Hindley, Ashton, there's a vast range of people, and we don't want some of those kids being siphoned off into a private school and sort of separated and insulated from the state school and the public education system. So I think actually, if more private school kids come into the state school system, I recognise the strain on resources that will place in the short term, but in the long term, I think that's a very good thing for those schools and for our country.
And just finally on this issue, there's concerns, isn't there, amongst members of the armed forces. They are able to put their children through private schools because they're often away, particularly when they get to secondary school. You want to keep the children in the same place. Should the government step in and support families with children who are in private schools from the armed forces?
Well, this government and I, as an individual MP, would never want to place any additional burden on the shoulders of those who serve us. We need to be doing everything that we can to support them, and that's one reason why this government has made sure that every vet, every former service person will have a home ready for them if they need it and if they're currently lacking it. I don't know about the individual detail of what it would take to solve that problem, but I do think if there is clear evidence that this is a problem for serving families, then it's something the government should look at.
And Josh Simons, you said recently that you think we should all get off Twitter, particularly you and me in our Westminster world, and do something else with our time, or use a different social media network. But there isn't one, is there? Or not one of comparable scale. What's your solution to the issue of the somewhat cesspit parts of Twitter can be like?
Well, I think this is something that we really have to think about in a fundamental way. And we have to get away a little bit, I think, from the slightly ridiculous binary that our debate about this is stuck in, between free speech on the one hand and really draconian regulation where governments are telling platforms, what content they can have up and what content they have to take down. I think what we need is something in between those two things. Newspapers all the time have ethical responsibilities, professional responsibilities that they abide by and that the whole sector abides by. I think what we need is something like that the people who are building these algorithms abide by too. And they say, look, in the end, we all have an interest, both businesses, government, citizens, all have an interest in a public debate that is better and more actually representative of what we're like offline in the online world, and particularly on Twitter. And therefore, we will commit to building algorithms that don't just make people angry, spread hate, spread disinformation, but that actually spread the kind of public debate that we have, in the pub in a coffee shop, having a cup of tea. That's what we're really like, and we need our online world to reflect that.
That's right. Part of the problem is, of course, people say things on Twitter and social media you wouldn't say in person, and that's the problem. Right. Would it be the government setting up a social media network, or these social media companies being forced to change the algorithms by law?
Well, I think they have an interest in this too. I mean, Twitter's become such a basket case that so many of us are leaving it. So I actually think there's a shared interest there, and it may not require the sort of heavy hand of the law coming on and saying, this is how you should regulate it online. I'm sceptical that the thing the government should be worrying about and spending its time on in terms of digital is building a social media tool. So I think it's about sitting down with the engineers, with the CEOs of these companies and saying, look, this isn't in your interest. It's not in the interests of the people represent. So we've got to change it, knowing that if that conversation doesn't make progress, then yes, it's something the government would have to look at in terms of a framework.
And Josh Simons, while the Labour government is getting on with its work and you're supporting that work as Labour MP, the Tory party is trying to find a new leader. How do you weigh up the two candidates? Which one do you fear most?
Well, it's been quite a weird week in the Conservative leadership debate. I stood up in the chamber in the middle of the week, just after Christopher Chope had said that Kemi Badenoch couldn't be leader of the opposition because she was too focused on spending her time with her children, which I thought was bizarre. And, a classic example of just being stuck about 30 years out of date. And meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch herself said these very strange things about maternity leave that she doesn't seem to actually believe. And this kind of bizarre, slightly self-referential conversation, I just think is a very long way from the kinds of things that the public are focused on. They're focused on waiting lists, the fact that GPs are not serving towns right across the country. They're focused on the fact that their pay and their pocket is going less far. These are the things that the Conservative Party needs to be talking about if it wants to have any hope of winning the next election. And frankly, I don't think either candidate is really talking about them.
You mentioned the real issues people are worried about, and I think the budget almost defines that in one place. Our postbag here at GB News is full of people worried about what's happening on October the 30th. If the Chancellor increases national insurance, that is a manifesto breach, isn't it?
Well, she will not increase national insurance on workers. That's the thing that Labour's leaders said again and again and again through the campaign. What they are focused on is the taxes on working people. And this idea that when businesses pay a tax and when workers pay a tax, national insurance, they're the same thing. They're just not. They're both called national insurance. One is paid by a worker, one is paid by a business. And Rachel Reeves has been very clear that she will not increase the taxes that workers pay.
Do you think it's going to be a difficult Halloween budget for many, though? £40 billion to be raised, cuts in spending, huge increases in taxation. I mean, this is the moment the government gets to work. The narrative is set, surely.
Well, I do think it'll be difficult. This is a budget that will last about a year before a long-term spending review process gets underway. And I think that means this budget's inevitably going to be about doing two things at the same time. One of them is balancing the books. It's filling that 25 billion black hole that this government has been left by the last Conservative government. And that is going to mean difficult choices on welfare, making sure people are getting back into work, for example. But at the same time, I think what you will see the government do, and I think you heard this from the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, earlier, they will also be laying the foundations for growth, for public services that actually work for people, for getting NHS waiting lists down. And that, above all else, is about investment. And I think what you'll see from this budget is both of those two things at the same time. Getting the books balanced so that we are not spending more than we're taking in, and also investing to lay the foundations for the future.
Thank you for joining us today on Camilla Tominey Show. Thank you.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxt boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. A stormy day out there with storm Ashley gradually clearing. Then it will be a case of blustery showers in the north, but drier towards the south. Looking at the bigger picture, this is this area of low pressure named Storm Ashley that will gradually be moving its way north and eastward, but a real squeeze in those isobars indicating some strong winds. There are Met Office wind warnings in force. We could see gusts 70 to possibly 80 miles per hour as we go through Sunday night and into Monday morning, followed by blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, drier towards the south with lows of 11 to 12 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, still some very strong winds, especially across northern parts of Scotland and then into Orkney and Shetland. Again, 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour here. Further towards the west, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east that you go with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down, but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds, but also some showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxt Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway, and you really could be next.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000. Winning the money enabled me to treat my children, which I've not been able to do for a while. And if I can win, anyone can win.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.